If I say Viking, most likely the first thing that comes to your mind are men charging from a ship carrying axes and shields, and they're out for blood. This is because modern media today, comics, TVs, movies, have put this image in our mind of a bloodthirsty um, barbarian that comes to different countries seeking murder and pillaging and possibly rape. None of these stories are completely accurate. That's because most of what we know about the Vikings is still very minimal. The Vikings had an oral tradition, and they passed down stories and sagas through generations by word of mouth. And so they did not write their histories down for us, leaving us to wonder who really were the Vikings. Today, I want to touch on a few topics that we do know. We know a little bit about the Viking home life and what was central to the Viking way of life, which brings us to our next topic, the Norse mythology. The Norse were very in touch with their religious beliefs as far as their gods and goddesses. And our third topic is going to be the infamous raids, the raids in which Vikings would pillage as much wealth as they could. So, the first topic we're going to start with, as I said, is going to be the Viking home life. A central Viking settlement would have consisted of long houses, one or two long houses, per family, most likely, and they would have had an extended family living within one house where most of the activity like crafting, sleeping, cooking, anything like that would have gone on in the home, everything under one roof. And the head of the household or the men of the household, if there were more than one, would go off on long extended trips to on these Viking raids to achieve wealth, or they might come home empty-handed and they would return home to their farming responsibilities, because farming and fishing were a way of survival in times when you couldn't leave to go raid. If the weather was bad, or if it was a bad time of year to take off and go raid, you had to make ends meet by farming and fishing. A lot of Viking day-to-day life was based around appeasing the gods, which brings us into my second topic regarding Norse mythology. So the Vikings would spend their days hoping to raise good crops, have as many children as they could. Fertility was always important. Or they would aim to succeed in battle if they were in battle. And these were things that you had to ask the gods for. You had to appease them. So a lot of sacrifices were made in the names of gods and goddesses in order to improve the daily lives of the Viking people, because they truly believed that these gods and goddesses were the reason for either their success or their failure. In the mind of the Viking warrior, the idea of a good death would come in the form of dying in battle. And that brings us into my third topic, which is the infamous raids. So the raids were a good chance for those who were seeking fame, because fame to the Vikings brought you immortality. Your name lived on if you did great deeds, or you died a wealthy man, or you died in battle. You would go into these raids as a chance to have glory and come home either with lots of wealth for your family and your community, or you would die in battle and you would be remembered as a hero and a warrior who fought and died graciously as a man wielding a sword or an axe. And that brought you fame in the fact that stories would be told about you for years to come by your children and your family. So not only were these raids central to obtaining wealth, but they brought fame if you died fighting in them. A lot of the raids were mainly focused on monasteries, and that's because the monasteries were filled with a lot of religious relics, and because the Vikings didn't see those religious relics as important to them because that's not their religion, they would melt them down and use them for other things. So if you stood in their way, naturally, they would kill indiscriminately in order to obtain that wealth. So that's just the few things that we know about the Vikings. It's still very little due to the fact that we're still learning. We do know a little bit about their home life, a little bit about their day-to-day, and we know a little bit about the gods and goddesses that they worshipped. There are books written about all these gods and goddesses, and if you ever get the chance to read them, the stories are fantastic. And the raids that have left such an impression on us were not seen by the Vikings as something they were doing wrong. They were simply trying to make a better way of life for themselves in a lot of ways. There's still a lot to be learned, and I hope that someday I will be able to achieve my goal of becoming an anthropologist, and I hope that I will be firsthand learning more about them. And I hope that this has given you an opportunity to see them in a different light. Thank you.